Ladies and gentlemen, start your engines. We are into the Origin major buy period. This is where men are made and boys fade away. Welcome back, Jay Z. Obviously, you've just come back into the top 100, right?
Yeah, so I bounced out of it last week. Got away from you for a week, and now I'm back in the top 90, 89th at the moment.
Mate, you're cheering. Coach as good as you, 89th place. Can we upgrade you to a top 20 finish from top 50 that you talked about last week?
I think it's a real chance. Like I have the ability, if things go my way, to really make a push with sort of the money situation I've got set up and some of the trades that I can make for guys like Hines and Crichton. I could do some real creative stuff if I want to. I'm still kind of on the fence about it, but I think if I do go for it, the upside is like a real high finish.
Mate, I'm looking forward to seeing it. From my side, I jumped to about 172. I was into like 140, and there was that last minute down date to Max Plath, I think it was. He caught like 6 points, and that was like 60 ranks. So yeah, I think we're both in a good spot heading into this buy period. Let's see what we can do. Look, without further ado, just a quick shout out to the sponsors before we get into the buys section. So today is sponsored by TBC Live, awesome predictions game. I got the link in the description below. If you do want to feature on Pimp My Team, you can do that via getting a good score on TBC. So check that out. The other sponsor here is SRL, Simulation Rugby League. These guys are awesome. They're starting their new season soon. So if you do want to create a player in the Simulation Rugby League, go check them out. I got a link to their Discord in the description below as well. They're an awesome group of guys, a fun comp. Now let's jump right into the buys here. Brandon Hands first. I'm going to jump in on this guy because I'm a Parramatta fan. I've been pretty frustrated with Joey Lussick as an Eels fan for the last sort of couple of months of footy. There have been a few moments in defence that have really sort of left a bad taste in my mouth. So Brandon Hand's coming in. It's not surprising from a coaching perspective. I think realistically, he could easily hold that starting spot long term, just with the performances Lussick was putting up. Whether he holds an 80-minute spot is probably the question there, right? Now, does he have to hold an 80-minute spot to be worthwhile? No, he doesn't, right? 230K, you could still get him in. But I think you need to temper your expectations a little bit with him. So you're getting a cash out, you're getting a guy who's going to score you 45 points this week. Whether he's going to be that long-term guy who gets you to 600K, probably not. But for now, this one's really hard to ignore. Are you grabbing him in this week, Jose?
He doesn't really fit my plans. I think he's a guy where if you don't have, or if you had like a Reece Robson that you were banking on not getting picked for Origin, he's kind of a godsend because he's at that cash out price, and he could average, I'm going to say, towards 35 to 40, give or take, not playing 80 minutes every week. So he's a really good option, and the benefit of him being base price means that you're not really risking anything. Like at worst, he becomes a dead spot in your team, but his upside is like 200K.
Yeah, he's massive. And then Kelma Tuolangi's the other guy here, about that price point. You got any hype for him, or do you think it's just Sean Lane coming back soon?
Yeah, so I'm pretty interested in Tuolangi because it fits my team most. So I'm only short a mid and an edge. The other option for me is Aitken, but Tuolangi seems on the cheaper side. And Trent Barrett's coached 2 games. He started him in both. So keep an eye on for the late team mail. But he played 77 minutes, I think it was. Sean Lane actually played a lot of middle in that game. And he's just been really underwhelming this year. So I don't know how Lane gets that spot back. He's looked so slow and out of shape, and he's just gotten carved up.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Kelma, I mean, look, it's the first game of the round, right, for Parramatta. So we get to see all those changes coming through. But for Tuolangi, I'm in the same spot. I need a middle and either a middle or an edge, and then an edge for my team. So looking at the same guys as you, Tuolangi, it's not that risky because if he gets the starting spot this week, he's going to play big minutes. He'll score all right in that game. If he gets dropped in the next few weeks or gets moved back to the bench, he's done his job for round 13. You can move him on. So I think there's some high upside plays there in Parramatta. We've got Max King and Jack DeBellin next. I'm going to throw it to you, man. If you had to pick one of these guys, which one would you prefer at this stage?
Yeah, so for me, Max King plays 13 and 16. I actually traded him in last week as a replacement for Jolliffe. I'm not thrilled with him as a purchase. I think he's pretty solid. Like of the guys available, it sort of just comes down to your needs. Do you need someone for 16? That's where I really struggle with numbers. So he was a no-brainer for me. Or do you need someone for 19? Where Jack DeBellin, they should both average around 50 points, you'd think. It's just which one suits your team better. And King's a bit cheaper too. So yeah.
Yeah, he's a good spot. Those dogs buys are absolutely awesome. I worry a little bit about Jack DeBellin. I was looking at the stats earlier. So he's moved to prop this week. So obviously Luciano's come back in. Eisenhuth's gone to lock. Jack DeBellin's gone to prop. Hame Sele, who's in a couple of teams, he's out for a while now. So for Jack DeBellin at prop, last year he averaged about 70 points in that spot over 3 games, but there were 3 games where he played 70 to 80 minutes. And that's not happening this year. So I don't think it's a really relevant sample size. This year he's averaged in the low 50s in 3 games at prop. Probably a more relevant sample, but that just sort of puts it at about a 51 average. And at 726K, it's like that borderline keeper kind of guy, right? That you're getting it at full price, which isn't that exciting. But at the same time, in the middle position and being a guy who isn't really much of a risk of getting hurt, isn't really a risk of getting dropped, I think you could plug either of these guys in. I think you could have both if you wanted to as well. And they'd shore up your middle spot through the origin period. And probably have to look at upgrading the guys like Payne Haas, Isaiah Yeo post origin. But yeah, for now, I think they're both rock solid options. I'd probably preference Max King over Jack DeBellin just slightly because we can't count on round 19, right? Round 19 planning, I think with the way this year's gone, it's a bit of a mirage. So I would focus on the near term and just go, hey, round 13, 16, we'll figure it out in round 19. Reed Marnie and you and Aitken here. Which one of these guys you want to talk about? Because Aitken was obviously on your radar, so you might want to chat about him.
Yeah, Aiken's someone that as soon as he sort of won that back row spot, he was just a slam dunk buy. But because there was so much chaos going on in the early season, everyone was getting injured. Like there were teams playing only 16 players in like round 4, I think it was. He sort of just has slowly increased his way up. And if you manage to buy him during that period, fantastic, you're flying. But also due to how many relevant centers there are this season, he also just hasn't had that emphasis on him as a buy. And now he's 750K. So that's probably the only deterrent for me is like, yeah, he's going to be the best center in the game. I think he's probably overscoring what he's capable of at the moment. So I don't know if I can justify 750K. It's a bit too early in the season to be settling on a position like center.
Yeah, I'm with you. He's well over full price right now. The other thing to look at for him as well, and he's the only guy on this list actually who suffers this, round 14 buy. So I've seen a few trades sent through to me where people are buying, 2 Roosters players, 2 Dolphins players. And you got to keep in mind that the Dolphins, the Chooks, and the Raiders are all off for round 14. If you look at my team, you're going to see a big problem there because I've got 6 of these guys. But yeah, you're in a tricky spot if you get too many guys for round 14 because it's a minor major buy. Like it's one that's going to cause some coaches some problems. The other guy here is Reed Marnie, 712K. Look, Reed is rock solid. He's just making that many tackles that he's going to get a good score most weeks. I was a bit worried about him last week when I saw Turpin appear on the bench. It meant about 10 minutes less for him, but he still produced like a 56-point game anyway. So for Reed, I was into him until Brandon Hands got named. And now I think if you're getting that hooker, it's hard to go away from Hands unless you also need a half, which I doubt many people do with guys like Armstrong, KO Weeks, Atkinson, Armstrong being relevant because the wing fullbacks are quite full. Tedesco, like all these guys in those spots. So I'd go Hands over Money. But if you do want that pod, Money's a pretty interesting one as well. Let's jump into the pods here, man, because these are some more interesting options. This is a bit of Jay-Z ball for everyone watching. So Mitch Moses is the first guy here. Look, 733K. Mitch Moses.
Yeah.
It feels like, in retrospect, it could be one of those moves where someone's going to be talking at the end of the year about how they won their league or they won fantasy. It's because they went early on Mitch Moses. Like I'm hearing the upside here. Can you bring the hype for this one as well? Let's live in the upside first.
Okay, so Mitch Moses, of all the halves left in fantasy, apart from Hines, who is quite busted at the moment, has the biggest upside. He is an out-and-out gun. He'll average close to 60 points. This Parramatta side have struggled so much without him. He's going to come in and do absolutely everything. He'll get his goal kicking back. He's just a gun. Like he has 100-point gains in. You can't say that about a lot of players. You can talk about the downside since we were focusing on the highs, but he's a bit risky for me.
Yeah. No, look, there is a lot of risk, but you got to live in that high first, right? So the mindset of a pod buyer is that little bit of delusion, right? But for Mitch Moses, it is a bit risky. I don't think there is that much risk for injury for him in terms of coming back. So if he was going to rush back, I would have thought that he would have rushed back last week, right? Or the week before when Brad Arthur's job was at risk, right? Or when he had a chance to make the Blues side. That's that's what I'm thinking. So I think they would have taken their time with him coming back. I think he'll be solid coming in. The risk is if the Blues lose and Moses plays some decent footy, he's the best genuine seven that the Blues have fit right now. And there isn't that other option of Adam Reynolds or Nathan Cleary who has that really strong kicking game. And I think that's one thing the Blues will struggle with a little bit with the configuration they have now. So yeah, for Mitch Moses, there's even that risk actually that Hines, with the calf being a bit dodgy, might not be available for Origin 2, right? So Moses is that next man up for the Blues side. It's pretty dicey, but if you want to roll the dice, you want to do something crazy, I don't mind Mitch Moses. We got Cardi here as well, 547k. Look, Cardi's a pretty simple equation. When Moses and Cardi play on that edge, Penasini spikes up quite a bit as well. So if you're a Penasini owner, enjoy that. But for Cardi, 547k, it's a pretty cheap price. He's a guy who looks like he's going to go back to big minutes in this Parasite. A little bit risky with Sean Lane sitting on the bench there and Kelma Tuolangi being a pretty considered guy in this forward pack now. So there is some risk there, but I think Bryce Cartwright could be one of those guys who bounces up to 700k at some point this year too.
Yeah, I fully agree. Cardi's just one of those guys, like a Sean Bloor, where every time he gets the ball, he's looking for an offload. He just has a lot of fantasy about his game. Like he has been good on the field lately as well, to his credit. But he's a tackle breaker. He loves those sideways runs, and he again loves the offload. So there is upside there. I'd probably lean more towards Tuolangi just because of the price point, though.
Yeah, it's hard to go past base price, hey. Tungo Alamotti, 496k, 535k. If you needed a center this week, right, and you wanted to get someone around that price point, you're looking at these two. Where would you preference out of Tungo versus Alamotti?
Tungo, just because I think he's the better player and probably has a bigger sort of fantasy base to him. So Alamotti seems somewhat more reliant on try scoring opportunities. We've seen from Taylor May as well, someone who does have a big work rate, that Luai just doesn't like passing his center on that side of the ball. So he might struggle from a bit of that too, the longer the season goes. So unless they swap edges, I'd be leaning towards Tungo.
I'm totally with you there. So I was looking at the stats, and Alamotti, there's a lot of games with sub 100 meters run at that center spot. And when we look at a guy like Herbie Farmworth, which is the next one here, a guy who I'm just going to brag a bit, both you and I are on Herbie Farmworth and enjoyed that 99-point game. But yeah, for Herbie Farmworth, it's always 160 meters run for him. Whereas a guy like Paul Alamotti, it's looking like there are games where it's 160, 200 meters when there's a 60-meter try. But a lot of these games are popping up as, 70-meter, 90-meter type games. And you just don't give yourself the opportunity to sort of pop off with those numbers. If Penrith were at full strength and absolutely firing and torching teams, and Cleary was in right now, and that 42-0 performance of last week was consistent, I'd maybe think about it a bit differently because the attacking plays would be there more consistently, but I just don't think the base is there for him. Whereas Tungo, 535k, I'd temper expectations for the immediate term, but I think as a long-term keeper option, he's quite interesting at that price. And yeah, you probably will prefer him over Kale Iro, for example, down the stretch post Origin when Cleary's back as well. So yeah, could take a shot at Tungo. Alamotti would be big pod if you want to do that too. Not many people are going to be able to jump on either of these guys as well because most of us have two centers already. So enjoy that pod. Herbie Farmworth at 634k. Look, the price hasn't changed that much, plus 50k from last week, but he went down a bit a couple of weeks before that. Is it too late for Herbie Farmworth if someone is well covered for round 14?
No, not at all. I think the Dolphins guys are just so good for the buy rounds. So that's why probably the biggest reason why I'm considering Aitken, even though I just said he's overpriced, is that they play all three buys, and that's just so key when almost every team is going to be short on one buy without having to make 5+ trades over this period. So getting in Dolphins guys, especially if you're well covered for next week, they're so good, and you should probably be looking at more Dolphins after round 14 as well.
Man, that burns me because I want Aitken as well. I want that second rower, and I just can't make it work with the Dolphins players. I don't know, that 55 average sort of came out of nowhere. I thought of him as more of a, 47, 48, 49, but he's been hitting elite numbers. Scotty Sorensen's the last guy here. And Scotty has not been reliable this year. So if you just looked at his numbers and looked at his season so far, you'd be thinking, no way. But from my side, I'm looking at Scott. I'm just thinking, look, it was a 52.5 average last year when he started at the second row. He played big minutes in that role last year. He has big attacking upside, but didn't rely on tinny plays last year. And he's got a good work rate, right? In a good Penrith side who, Liam Martin's going to play Origin. Isaiah Yo's going to play Origin. Like these guys aren't going to play, especially Liam Martin. He's been getting a rest. They're not going to play huge minutes through this period. So at 558K, the only risk to Sorensen, really, well, there's two of them, is one, Luke Garner comes back and there's some sort of minute share scenario because he played quite well to start the year, or two, an injury, right? But other than that, I think he's pretty safe, and I think he's a good gamble to take.
Yeah, so his dual position is just so valuable. So even if you were to bring in like an Aitken to be your second rower, you could just plug Sorensen in the mid. I think his biggest downfall, or the thing holding me back from absolutely 100% locking him in, is that Penrith only play the first bye. So they cover all the minors, but the other minor buys aren't as hard to cover. Whereas there's a lot of guys after, once we get past round 13, like your Kyle-Matungis and South and Titans players, that are gonna play the last two buys, and even Tigers players. So for me, I have to toss up whether I need the immediate play for Sorensen or whether or not covering the next two buys is more important. So he's really good. His price point is excellent. He's probably about 100 to 150K underpriced. So I absolutely love the trade. But
I'll throw a curveball in here too, right? Because you talk about Aitken, Sorensen. Obviously, the buy schedule is really important, but Aitken's 200K more than Sorensen, right? Aitken covers center, so it's obviously a very different positional scenario too. But for just this week at the second row spot, my bet is you'd get a similar score from both guys this week. Maybe give Aitken a 5-point head start sort of thing. But I think in general, they're quite similar scorers. I wouldn't let this year sort of sway it too much. So I think Sorensen is in a position where he could be potentially really elite for you. But yeah, you're right. Good call. Because those later major buy rounds, you got one where I think it's the Bunnies, Manly, and the Titans or something like that, which is much easier to cover. I think it's round 17. And then, round 20 isn't as tough as well. And by that point, we're at our sort of gun squads too. So Scotty Sorensen, good shout. If you had to buy one of these guys, no positional restrictions whatsoever, which one jumps out at you?
Mitch Moses, if we can be sure that the Blues win game one.
I love that. The super pod from Jay-Z, Mitch Moses comes in. Look, quick shout out here too, the TBC Live. Again, I haven't them at the start, but you would have been seeing TBC Live all over what I'm doing right now. So awesome app. It's a game I'm playing over the weekends. Basically, the game allows you to make predictions during the game. So if you're watching Parramatta play on Friday, for example, you might think, hey, Mitch Moses is going to run 100 meters and score a try to take Parramatta up to 50-0. That's what I'm predicting in my dreams tonight. But if you make that call, everyone's going to disagree with you. And if it comes up true, you're going to win big. So TBC Live, awesome game. Really fun sort of predictions style. Make sure you download the app. It's in the description below. All right, hold or sell. And this is probably the main event of today's video, right? Because these are the Origin players, the guys who they've been performing for us so far this year, except for Harry Grant. And they've been turning up, but do we trust them through this period? So in a year where there's been so many injuries, will they back up from Origin? Is probably the big question. Now, to set the scene for this particular section, all of these guys will probably miss rounds 13, 16, and 19 due to them playing Origin. And they'll also miss all other major buy rounds as well. You don't get fantasy points for Origin games. So let's just cover that off straight away. From this list, Jay-Z, I'm going to throw it to you first here. If you had all of these players, hypothetically, you'd be doing quite well so far. But if you had all these guys, which one of them would you be most urgent to sell?
So for me, I'm going to go with a contentious one here. It's Nico Hines. Because he's $1 million of your salary cap, and he is all but locked into missing 13, 14, 16, and 17. Now, the interesting part about Hines, and still a reason why I think trading him out is an option, is he might be available for the Sharks come round 19. At which point you can trade him back in after he's missed, let's be conservative and say 4 out of the next 6 games. He's going to lose a stack of money. His break even's about 110.
Oof.
So when he does play, assuming he does play, I think it's unlikely he backs up given his calf problems.
Mhm.
But in round 15, so you get one game between the first two origins, and the Sharks have the bye in 16 anyway, and then or is it 17? I can't remember. But basically, he's going to miss a lot of time. He's going to lose money. I think he's the most urgent sell of all these guys.
Yeah, they've got buys 16 and 20.
Yeah,
So if you do hold him through this period and he sticks in the origin side, he'll miss 19 and 20 as well. So
yeah.
it's pretty dicey. I'm with you there. I think that's a good shout. Nico Hines, you can free up a lot of cash, and it makes the conversation about a guy like you and Aitken much more palatable when you've got all that spare money. So I think he's a good shout as a sell. I'll throw the next one up here, and this is probably a little left field as well, but I'm going to go with Cam McInnes as a firm sell. And it's not anything to do with him necessarily. So he's a guy where if they said to him, hey, play Origin on Wednesday, play for Cronulla on Saturday, play 80 minutes in both games, and also play an 80-minute game of footy every day in between, he'd turn up and he'd absolutely do it. But the issue is you look at the Cronulla side, and I look at that extended bench in particular. Guys like Toby Rudolph, for example, right? Not playing big minutes right now. Hamlin ULA, not playing big minutes. These guys can easily scale up to 40, 50, 60 minutes in a game. A guy like Jack Williams, he can play big minutes as well. So I think Cronulla being in a pretty good position on the ladder and having all that depth means that they're not going to give Cam McInnes a good chunk of minutes through this origin period because they're going to know that they need him in the postseason. They need that toughness through the middle. So I think Cam McInnes, he'll probably stay in the origin side. I can't see him being dropped too easily, but even when he's backing up, it's just going to be quiet games. And look, I think you and I are both saying here, out Cronulla, right?
Yeah, I think the Cronulla guys are really bad for Origin, and to your point, Cronulla have a lot of middle depth,
Mm.
so they've already shown a willingness to not play McInnes for massive minutes in games. So I think you'd be naive to suggest that they wouldn't do something along those lines during this period to manage him better.
Yeah, yeah, good shout. Next one, who have you got? Let's go through the whole thing in this order.
What, just picking whoever? Okay.
Pick whoever, man. Yeah.
I'm going to say Reece Robson. So Reece Robson, probably just a non-elite hooker for mine. Maybe at the moment he is, but if you can, or if he was part of your buy plans, I think he's a reasonable sell for someone like a Jeremy Marshall King or a Reed Marnie, as we talked about. You're probably a bit too late on the likes of Jaden Brayley, but Robson, his strength was that he played the first buy and plays the in-between rounds, but due to the sort of shock that he got picked over Api Coruscant, his value's gone down a fair bit. Um, he's still a good scorer, but he showed towards the back end of last year as well that he started to fatigue, drop off a lot of tackles, and his scores, I think he only averaged about 46 on the run home last year. So I don't hate the idea of selling him.
Yeah, I think it's a good shout. He's had a few nice attacking plays. Like the Cowboys have had a really good run of fixtures as well to start the year. It gets a little bit harder as they go along through this period. At the same time, though, I look at Robson. I've got Robson and Jaden Brayley as my hookers, for example. And theoretically, if Robbo was to back up, well, then that could be a nice little combination, right? Because Brayley does have a bit of coverage. I'll probably have to have a look at that later in the bias period. But he might not be one that I prioritize selling as hard as this next guy. I'm going to throw him in, Reese Walsh. And for Walshy, look, I've owned him for about 5 weeks. He's had a pretty good period, a few pretty big games where he sort of shoots up in the scores and then takes the foot off a little bit and picks up a niggle and sort of slows down. Or he's missed one game in that period as well. He's sort of been pulling up short a little bit lately too. So I'm looking at him and just thinking, look, if he's carrying any sort of niggle into this Origin period, he plays hard in Origin, which he absolutely will, then he's going to get a rest for Brisbane, right? And they've got some pretty capable backups for that fullback spot as well. So I'm just going to sell Walsh, right? I've got plenty of guys. I've got Armstrong. I've got Tedesco. I've got KO Weeks, all these sorts of players who, Tolotau Kola, all these players who can plug in. I don't really need Walshy. And as much as he's probably going to shoot up in value over the next couple of weeks, I think he's too much of a risk to get rested. And I just don't have the space in my roster for that.
Yeah, and I think I'll sort of join this with the next guy as well, Pat Carrigan, because they have the same buy schedule and play for the same team. Their buys aren't that bad for an overall player. So they theoretically, if they were to back up, they play all the minors. throughout the period, and their last bye is on the run home. I think it's round 24, so it's outside of the Origin period. The concern with them is the backing up factor, though. So we saw even on the weekend, Paddy Carrigan's minutes were lowered a little bit. Like you said, Reece Walsh looked like he was playing with a bit of a limp. So it's perfectly reasonable to assume with the guys they have, especially like the Xavier Willisons who need minutes, the Fletcher Bakers who can play big minutes for the Broncos as well. Their concern is the backing up and whether or not they miss more than just the 3 games. I'd probably lean towards them backing up where possible, but I'd be a bit more concerned with Reece Walsh just because of that knee injury that we've sort of talked about already.
Yeah, completely. With Carrigan, the one thing I'm going to count in his favor here is obviously Haas has had a couple of injuries so far this year. So I think the less Haas plays, the more Carrigan gets to play. There's a chance that he could maintain a pretty good run of form through this period, especially considering, look, 784K, it's not an absurd price to pay at a middle spot that's pretty dicey. So yeah, he could be one that you hold on to, but at the same time, he probably does take a bit of a dip through this period. We've got 2 guys left here. So Ruben Cotter and Harry Grant. Ruben Cotter, and I was looking at this like a month ago, and we were actually having a chat, and I was just thinking, I'm going to sell Cotter for sure. And you actually talked me out of it at the time, sort of citing a couple of specific cases that were causing him to have quieter games at the back end of last year, or through the Origin period last year. And the more I thought about it, the more the cards sort of stacked against all these other guys. So I'll go Ruben Cotter next. I think Harry Grant's the one that you would potentially hold through this period. But for Ruben Cotter, the Cowboys just don't have options, right? So he's out this week. He's the only middle forward missing for the Cowboys this week. Obviously, Nanai's out, but Finafuyaki comes in, that's fine. But with Cotter out, they've got Thomas McKaylee starting at lock, which I can't imagine is a serious configuration they want to be running more than just this week. If they threw McIntyre in, I'd maybe be a little bit more concerned because McIntyre's a little like he's not Cotter, right? But he's a little bit more of an equivalent to Cotter in terms of the structure. But McKaylee coming in just makes me think, yeah, they're not planning for life outside of Cotter really here, right? They're just going to go. He comes back, he walks in. If they get a big lead, they might rest him, but I think he's going to play relatively regular minutes through this Origin period.
Yeah, exactly right. That was kind of the argument that I used when you were certain that you were going to sell him about a month ago. Is
Copied
that
you, mate. Copied you completely.
Last season, the only game where he played less than sort of 50 minutes was when they won 74-0 and he came off and just didn't come on for a second stint. And that was backing up for Origin as well. Look, call me a bit conservative, but I don't think the Cowboys in their current form are going to put 74 points on a team. Maybe they do, but I don't know. I just don't see it happening with Jake Granville at hooker and Tom McKaylee starting at lock.
I'm with you there, man. I'm with you there. And Harry Grant, last guy here. Look, 705K. I think the discount is already baked in on Harry Grant. Like, I think I look at him and I just go, you know what? He's not going to sink in price. The buy schedule is not that bad, at least to start off. And he shares that role with Ben Hunt in the Origin side. You've got no Cam Munster, no Pappenhausen for the Storm, so they need that leadership of their captain as well. Like, the more I look at him, I just think he's going to play a pretty regular role. He's not going to have Wishart sitting on the bench waiting for him to come off because Wishart's starting 6 right now. So I think Harry Grant could be very productive through this period.
Yeah, all very valid points. I think he probably won't play 80 in the games straight after Origin, but you're still probably looking at 60 minutes from him. And he's shown in the past that he doesn't necessarily need 80 minutes to produce an acceptable score. He's probably still going to average 50 over the Origin period, and his buys are really good for overall players in terms of guys that play all 3 Origins, because he'll play all the minors and then he doesn't have a buy on the run home where the Broncos do.
Yeah, at that price, right? If he was 850K, which is a price that he's at often, right? It'd be a different conversation. But at 705K, I'd be eyeing him off as a buy. If we weren't in the Origin period, I'd be waiting for my chance to move to him at this price. So yeah, stick with him. I think he's a good shout to run through this period. Captaincy options is interesting as well. So captains with Nico Hines not playing this week, it's actually so much better for the captaincy roulette because it means you got a chance here to make a call on someone and you can be a little bit of a chicken and go with one of your middle options and get yourself 45 to 60 points. Or you can be an absolute mad dog and take one of these guys on the board, or a couple of guys we're going to talk about who aren't even on this list. I'm going to open up with Tedesco because, look, I'm a Teddy truther. I've had him from round 1. He had that dip. People got off. I didn't get off the Teddy train, and I'm not getting off now. Captain Tedesco, he's been dropped from the Blues side, but he's still the captain of my fantasy side. Equally honourable, I would say. I just reckon he tears up though, right? Like the Cowboys, you got them. You got no Ruben Cotter, no Jeremiah Nanai, no Tom Dearden, no Reece Robson, no Valentine Holmes, no who else is there? Murray Talangi. Like
All right, Talangi.
mate, it's a disaster for their edge setup, middle setup, everything. It's going to be a tough game, and I think Tedesco absolutely tears up, especially with all eyes on him before the Origin game.
Yeah, I'm really sad that he didn't get picked for Origin. Not because not as a blue, but more as a fantasy player. Because I think if everyone had have known this when he was at like 570k or whatever it was, he'd be the most commonly owned player in fantasy. But unfortunately, I missed that.
You should have believed with me.
Yeah, well, I wish I had that hopium.
Yeah, man. No, it was 50-50. I actually thought he'd get picked for Origin, to be honest. I was picking him up for the first 12 rounds and thinking I'd have to sell him at this stage. And yeah, it's a bit of a blessing here. I'll throw to you, man, and you can pick one from here. Like, I mean, who's jumping out at you as a good captain option this week?
So the bloke I'll be captaining this week is Dylan Brown.
Ooh.
I think mostly because I don't really have any other super solid options. I think Teddy's sort of the gold standard. If I were to go spice it, my other options are like Kiraz or Drinkwater. And I'm not in love with Max King. I'll let you talk about him in a moment. But I think Dylan Brown just has the highest upside. Moses is back in the team. He'll get a bit more sort of space to run the footy. He won't have as many touches, but I think you'll start to see the touches that he does get become more quality. He gets to go back to his preferred edge. And Cronulla without Nico Hines and Cam McInnes, two really important players for them. So I wouldn't write Para off, especially with Moses and Gutho back this week.
Oh yeah, I'm tipping Parramatta for the 13th week in a row. So yeah, with you there completely, totally unbiased. I don't mind that shout. I think Cronulla will put on a decent enough defensive performance in this game. They were absolutely belted last week, so they'll surely rock up and sort of play some decent footy. But Dylan Brown, he doesn't really score below 40. So you've got the upside of a 70, 80-point game without the downside of any sort of risk, really. So I like that shout. Joey Manu is a guy, and he's probably the riskiest option on this list in terms of the base stats. He's at like 780k or something for a reason, and he's been tearing up with Dom Young next to him, and he's probably going to do that again this week. So I'm looking at him and just thinking, I don't even care who he's up against. If it's Violea, if it's Chester, either way, he's going to be outmatching his opponent, and he could pop off. Like, he's probably one of the guys, him and Teddy, I think, are the two that have that 100 plus potential this week. But Joey could also score 30, 35 points for you too. So if you have Joey Manu, I'd pretty strongly consider it this week.
Yeah, look, this game could get real messy with the lineups that have been named, especially with James Tedesco playing for the Roosters. I think he's a bit riskier, but he almost has more upside than Teddy this year, just because he offloads the ball a bit more, and he's got Dom Young outside him. So all he needs to do is find a pass, and that big winger will just score so many tries. I think he scored 3 or 4 the other week, and he's making line breaks every time he touches the ball. It's the best right-hand combo in the game. They could put on 60 points, and 6 tries could come from that edge this week. So definitely something someone to
right?
consider.
Too.
Yeah.
So like he's out, so they're going to go that edge a lot more. Is Gus Crichton on their edge? I'm just trying to remember. No, he's not. That was Nat Butchred, wasn't it? So Bradley. Yeah, okay. I wonder who plays there. It doesn't really matter, right? But Gus Crichton's out from the other edge as well. So that other edge is going to be pretty depleted this week, which, yeah, lends itself to this. Good shout. Reed Marnie, JDB, Max King. These guys are all kind of the same captaincy option, really, this week. You're picking a guy who's going to make a bunch of tackles, and in the case of JDB and King, a bunch of run meters as well. You're not really picking a guy based on attacking stats. So Reed goes up against a relatively full strength Newcastle Knights in terms of what they've been putting up previously. JDB and King, again, relatively full strength or tougher opponents. So I'm not backing big upside here. But if you don't want to sort of have a cortisol spike for about 2 hours in the game that your players, your captain's playing, go with one of those guys. They're relatively safe. So yeah, they're pretty easy options. I know you had a few crazy ones as well outside of this list. So who else is jumping out at you, man?
Yeah, so a guy that I sort of just touched on, Dom Young, playing on the wing
Oh,
against the Cowboys.
Dom Young captain. Oof.
Man, he has so much upside. Like we saw against the Warriors, he was on, I think it was 62 points in 11 minutes. That's the type of fantasy scoring that guy has. Like, if the Roosters demolish the Cowboys, which I think is a very possible thing, he could score 5 tries. I said the other week, he's going to have a game where he just scores 5 tries in a game and that no one can touch him. And that could be this week. Origin period's perfect for someone like him.
I'm 99% sure that Ikuvalu scored the 5 tries against the Cowboys as well
Yeah,
on the right
100%. It
wing.
was.
Was
It
the
definitely
Cowboys?
was. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it was the Cowboys.
Yeah. Mate, okay, so if Ikuvalu can score 5, why not 10? Why not 12?
Yeah, why not? Why stop there?
Joey Manu next to him too. This could be all right. All right. Let's pick this. Actually, we should pick the number of tries he's going to score. I'm going to say, look, realistically, the number is close. The over under is probably like 1.5. I would say, like if we were
Yeah.
looking at betting. I'm going to call 6. I just think I'm with you. I think he pops off.
Yeah, I thought you were going to go for something far more conservative, like a 2, but not
Have
6
you met
tries.
me, man?
That's true. I think anywhere between 2 and 4. Like, I'd be very surprised if he doesn't score a double in this game. This has Dom Young all over it. I'm
Yeah,
going to go with 3. He gets a hat
3.
trick.
There's some free betting advice for everyone, by the way. Just bet on the hat trick plus, and both our picks are covered there. Like you're basically 100% guaranteed. No, I like him as a good shout for captain this week. A few I've been asked. I've been asked for McKaylee captain. Should people do that? If you brought Moses in, would you do that? Who else have been asked for Dragons, you got one person asked for Sloan, which is brave.
Okay.
Is there anyone else that jumps out? Maybe like a Preston playing 80 minutes, for example, or Kai Pierce Paul, pretty safe,
Yeah.
right?
Kai Piss-Paul's a good one. If you own Brad Schneider somehow, he's probably a consideration. Sam Walker was another one I had for the same reasons as Dom Young, really. Like we saw him score 90 odd against the Dragons. If you think the Roosters are going to go off this week, there are so many players on that team that have the potential to just go gargantuanly big. So anyone there, you'd consider him. Terrell May, if you had him, is an option
Oh,
too.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Or
that's
Nafu
one.
White.
Is he starting lock again? He played 69 minutes last week. How does Trent Robinson come up with his forward rotations? They're just like
Yeah.
one guy
I forgot
randomly
to put
plays a
him in.
monster minute.
I forgot to put him in this video, man. Like Nafu White, he was so high on my list because he was 424K last week. He would be up to what's he up to now? Like he actually is. If you are all good for round 14, he is like here we go 458K. He has enormous upside. That 458K, even if the minutes taper a little bit, that's kind of interesting with Radley on the edge, right?
Yeah, look, Radley on the edge has thrown everything just like for a loop. I can't believe they've done that. They have about 6 back rowers in the squad, and Radley is not one of them, and yet he's starting over like Nat Butcher. I don't know where that's come from, but he played really well on the weekend. To his credit, he made 2 absolutely like rapid line breaks, destroyed the Raiders' edge, which has freed up so many minutes for the guys like Nafahu White. I think you'd have to be worried about Connor Watson coming back. I think he was only sort of a 4-week
Mm.
injury, so maybe he's back around 15-ish, you'd say. But Nafahu White, again, a lot of upside in that guy too. Him, Terrell May over the Origin period. I think Lenu getting picked for Origin was a surprise to many. I don't think anyone really had him in the team on form over a guy like Utu Ikamanu, for example. But that's freed up more minutes. Like if you look at that Roosters bench, there is not a lot of big minute guys there.
Well, Jennings is on there, right? Tupanua will be middle for this game. Sandon Smith, yeah. Nafi White, though, that's a good point about Watson. That sort of pours water on that one. But if you're in a draft league, you get him for this week. It's a good shout. Um, yeah, that would be interesting. This Roosters lock spot's really interesting. So what I've heard, it's completely unconfirmed, and I think it's speculation at the pub from Chugs fans, is that they want a more direct lock and less of a ball playing lock so that Sam Walker gets more first receiver ball. So they've moved Radley to the edge to facilitate that. Whether that's a long-term move, I mean, I guess they haven't re-signed Gus Crichton yet. I would think at some point they're planning for Suo Wong to be in that starting side. So I'm not sure if they're going to stick with this long term, but seems to be the move right now. All right, man. Well, good sesh. Good sesh. That's buy, hold, sell for this week. Shout out again to TBC Live, SRL. Make sure you download those. Link in the description. And best of luck this week because it's like, oh my God, I'm going everywhere. It is this is a different image. It's a crazy week though. Yeah, good luck this week. Let us know in the comments if you have 13 players. Remember too, only the starting players count this week. We probably should have started with that. But only a starting 13 count this week. No one on your bench counts. Auto emergencies can only fill into their actual position. So if you have 3 centers, for example, only 2 of those guys are going to count. Any last words from you, Jay-Z?
Yeah, I'd just say a word of caution in over picking players for the buys. Don't trade in someone that is going to be a 40-point average for the rest of the season just to have an extra number in one buy round. And be careful with the Roosters, Raiders, and Dolphins players.
Yep. Round 14, beware. Don't tear your team apart for the buys. Love it.